So, is everybody okay? First class? Everybody knows what they're doing? I see fresh new clicker-like boxes. I'm so proud. We will be using those clickers at the end of class today, or after we finish chapter 1, before we begin chapter 2. So if your clicker is still fresh and new in the box, break that puppy open and throw the batteries in, because we're going to need it. If you're just getting it today, don't worry about it. The clicker function that we're going to do will work, but I am not going to actually grade it. We're just going to kind of do an exercise for fun. Next week, that's when I start getting down and dirty with the clicker. Yes? Who still does not have a clicker? Raise your hand, oh clickerless people. Okay, only you? That's embarrassing. Oh, and you? See, you notice they go, so nobody can see their hand. Okay, get it by next Thursday. Because next Thursday I'll definitely ask you something that then is going to be part of a quiz grade I call the clicker quiz. Yes? Good. So, we left off talking about that good old language of anatomy that we were all going to have to know, and you're all pretty excited about for this course. A lot of that stuff from chapter 1 is rote memorization. There's nothing I can do about it. Sorry, guys. But it's stuff that you have to know so that you can understand your book and how it's written in the future. Okay? It will help you in the future. Know it now. It will make your life easier. Yes? And remember, I told you what were you going to have to know for this class. Yep. So we left off talking about some of the things that help maintain human life, because again, this class is called Human Anatomy and Physiology. We talked about maintaining boundaries, movement, responsiveness, digestion, metabolism. Does that ring a bell with everybody? We forgot to talk about excretion. Is that important? Yeah. Why do you think that's important? To get rid of wastes. So imagine if you lived in a small box and you could never ever throw out any of the trash that you generated. Yeah, that's bad, yes? Okay. So excretion is very important. Different systems have the responsibility of getting rid of the waste products you generate from metabolism. Does everybody know what the term metabolism means? If I said to you metabolism, pick one word that would describe it, what would that word be? Only one word. Reactions. That's a good one. That's a good one. All you other guys that said your stuff, you're right too. Reactions is also a good word, but yeah, it's reactions is a good one. What was the other one? Oh, energy and stuff like that. Those reactions can produce things like energy. Those reactions can make new molecules. Those reactions can break down molecules. So when I say metabolism, it's a very broad term that describes reactions that go on in the body. I was actually thinking of chemistry, but reactions is better. Okay? So all of those things work together to help us as organisms maintain homeostasis. Why isn't this doing its thing? Oh, there we go. What's homeostasis? Balance, set point, the norm. The other thing we have to do as organisms is grow. This is a good thing for our mothers, that we are not the size we are now when we were born, right? And your mother is very grateful for that. The other thing is you are constantly wearing out many of your cells on a daily basis. So what do you have to be able to do? Regenerate them, grow new ones. So that's all under that category. What do we need to survive as organisms? Yeah. Nutrients, yeah, you're reading from the book, that's good. Why do we need nutrients? Some of them we're going to use to make our energy for metabolism. What else? If I need to make new cells, I need the parts that make those cells, don't I? So in the nutrient category, I'm going to need the building blocks for metabolism. And that's a fancy science way of saying I need the building blocks to make new cells. I need what they're made of to make new ones. Yes? So we get that from nutrients. Now, many of those nutrients we have to do what with? Eat, take in. We can then use those building blocks to make some of the other building blocks to make some of the very important molecules. Things like proteins, for example. What are proteins made of? Do you know? Amino acids. And we can actually make some of our own amino acids. But some of them we can't. So where do we have to get them to make our proteins? We have to eat them. So that's nutrients. Oxygen. Why do we need oxygen? Yeah, oxygen is going to allow us to be the complex organisms that we are. Does everybody know what I mean by that? What kind of cells do we have? This comes from general biology, a biology-ish type course. Huh? You are eukaryotic organisms. You have large cells that are highly organized. You have a membrane-bound nucleus packed full of very wonderful nucleic acid material. And you have membrane-bound organelles. In order for you to have all this amazing stuff in your cellular makeup, you have to make a lot of energy. And in order to make a lot of energy, oxygen is going to be a key ingredient. I can make energy without oxygen. Did you know that? Bacteria do it. Yeasts do it. Compare those cells to my cells. Are they as complex? Are they as big? Or wonder why? Maybe because those organisms can't do what? Produce enough energy to make their cells bigger and more complex. But you can, because you use a form of producing that energy that uses a lot of oxygen. So when I ask you way into the respiratory system, or maybe even today, why do you breathe? What is going to be your amazing scientific response to that? Or get in what important ingredient? Right, to bring in oxygen for, and we call this wonderful reaction that you're going to be friendly with next semester, chapter 25. Cellular respiration, which is a reaction of metabolism that produces quite a bit of that energy for us with the help of oxygen. So that's very important for complex organisms to be able to make a lot of energy so they can be complex. Water. Why do we need water? And we're going to talk about it in that dirty word chemistry chapter. Yeah. Remember all this chemical reaction that I'm talking about? Guess what the medium is that it takes place in? Water. Water is a universal solvent, and it's an extremely important substance for living systems. So chemistry can take place in it. Body temperature has to be maintained at a normal level. What's normal for us human being-like people? 98.6-ish degrees Fahrenheit, and remember we like the metric system, so give me a Celsius. 37 degrees Celsius. And we are warm-blooded organisms. So a lot of our reactions that take place, reactions of metabolism, and the molecules that we make like that temperature to function properly. So we and our systems are designed to help us maintain that temperature, that core body temperature, so that all of the chemistry that we talk about can take place at an even rate, at a normal rate, and I don't start messing with the shape of my molecules. Atmospheric pressure is also going to play a key role in functioning as a human being. Why? Why do you think pressure has anything to do with anything? Too much pressure, I can't breathe. That's good. How come? Yeah, a lot of the physiology that we're going to talk about when we talk about our systems specifically, so since we said breathe, let's talk about the respiratory system. Gas exchange in the respiratory system has to be at a certain pressure, because exchange of molecules from one place to another is driven by a couple of things. And one of the major things it's driven by is pressure differences. Now you can apply this to your own self. You ready? What kind of pressure would you rather be under? High pressure or low pressure? I'm voting for low. Would you rather have 750 things to do in 5 minutes, or would you rather be sitting on the beach at the Bahamas with a pina colada? I'm going for the pina colada. I don't know about you. And molecules and atoms and movement kind of works the same way. Things like to go from a high pressure to a low pressure. So if I can't set up this pressure gradient, this pressure difference, I'm going to have trouble with gas exchange. I'm going to have trouble breathing. Yes? So we good? So atmospheric pressure is very important. Again, when we talk about specific systems and exchange that's going on, we'll revisit that concept. So at this point, hopefully we understand what homeostasis is. But before we do that, I want a quick review. Integumentary system. Skin, what's it for? Yeah, it provides us our boundaries. It protects us from that nasty, scary outside world of scary little nasty organisms. And what else? Keeps us from drying out, which would not be good. Because remember, we are water-driven in there. What else? Yeah, it's going to actually help us produce some vitamins with some of those building blocks and nutrients. And it is going to also help us get rid of something. Perspiration is how we do it. Heat. It's going to help us maintain that heat balance. So when I sweat, what am I doing? Two things. I'm getting rid of fluid. I get sweaty. That sweat stuff is also getting rid of waste products for me. And excess what? Excess waste, and most of our sweat is water, right? So some ions we get rid of there. But when water evaporates off of a surface, it has a very high heat of vaporization. I'm getting a little technical there, but let's go layman's terms. What's that mean? When it turns from a liquid to a what? A vapor or a gas, it's going to suck a lot of heat with it. And you can actually almost feel it happen when I speed up the evaporation process. And you've probably done this a lot this summer. Anybody stand in front of the fan and go, oh. You can actually feel it happen faster because you're doing what? When you blow the air across it, you speed up the what? The evaporation process. So you actually can detect that difference in temperature happening when you speed up that process. And you do that all the time, not only in summer, you do it in the winter. And if you don't believe me, smell your armpits on your clothing before you put them in the laundry after the coldest of days. Yes? They get a little, yeah. That's why we have to do the laundry every once in a while, right? So, they're going to help maintain homeostasis. Skeleton, what's it for? Yeah, it's kind of our structure system. If I build a building, I have to have like a foundation and a structure to build it on. This thing, my skeleton, allows me to move through my environment, which is important for me to maintain homeostasis. What else, though? We're going to throw some marrow in there, or immature blood cells. Now, what's blood for? Everything. It's kind of like the transport system to bring things from one place to another. Things like oxygen, things like nutrients, things like wastes. So the immature cells that make up a major portion of what we call blood, our transport stuff, hang out in bones. What else hangs out in bones that is very important for us to function as humans? Who? Minerals, like calcium, phosphorus, magnesium. It's actually a storage space for those as well. Those ions are very important for functions like your nervous system. So when we talk about the nervous system and neuron physiology, we're going to visit with some of these ions and see how important they are for the function of those cells. Muscular system. Movement. Not just movement, though. Heat. Because one of the waste products of muscle contraction is heat. So it's going to help us as organisms maintain that core body temperature. If you don't believe me, think back to the last time you took a little nappy on Sunday. You think back. Don't you wish you were there now? You're just lying there, a little nap. And you get up, and everybody else in the house seems fine, and you're cold. You say, geez, it's cold in this house? And everybody's like, no, it's not. Why do you think you're cold? Because while you were nappy, you weren't moving as many muscle groups as everybody else in the house that wasn't napping. So there's your proof. Yes? Good. Endocrine system. Now, this system kind of works hand in hand with another system to help control body functions, to help control the organs that help to work to maintain homeostasis throughout the body. What do you think the other system is? The nervous system. The endocrine system is going to do sort of the same thing, but it's not going to do it the same way. It's going to use hormones. So the endocrine system, when we hit that discussion, we'll discuss all of the different organs in this system and the hormones that they produce and the end result of their function. Cardiovascular system, what's that for? Transport, perfect word. Transport system. Transport nutrients after I digested them to my cells. Transport oxygen after I absorb it from the respiratory system to the rest of the body, and then transport wastes from metabolism to the organs that are going to help me get rid of that waste. Yes? Respiratory system. And carbon dioxide. We got to get rid of some waste gases that we produce in metabolism. So not only is the respiratory system responsible for getting in the good stuff, oxygen, but it's also very important in getting in the stuff that we don't need, carbon dioxide. Getting out, I should say, the stuff we don't need, carbon dioxide. Yes? Digestive system. Yep, makes big things small so we can do what with them? Use them at a cellular level for reactions. Yes? Now, not everything that goes into the digestive system can be used. So another very important part of the digestive system is to get rid of the stuff I couldn't use. And what's that? Waste and elimination. Yes? So think of a Twinkie package. I like Twinkies. So they'll come up in the class several times. So you eat the little cakes in between, those wonderful little cakes in between, and the wrapper that wraps around them is not used. So when we think of digestive system, everything that we put in there that we couldn't use comes out. Reactions of metabolism also produce waste. And this system is going to help me get rid of that kind of waste. So the urinary system helps me get rid of waste products produced by reactions of metabolism, not the Twinkie wrappers. Where did the Twinkie wrappers get eliminated from? The digestive system. You don't eat the Twinkie wrappers, but you know what I mean, right? The urinary system deals with reactions of metabolism waste. It also is very important in helping to maintain the proper balance in my blood. Specifically, the proper balance of things like water and ions. So the urinary system helps to keep electrolyte, acid base, and water balance in the system. And then the world does not end with you, although some of you sometimes think it does, but it doesn't. And if we want to continue on as a species, we need to reproduce. As an organism, we don't have to reproduce, do we? We're here when we're gone, but we're talking species-wide. So, reproduction is also a system that we will discuss. Males and females have different reproductive organs, and their job is to produce the reproductive cells, which are a little bit different than all the rest of your body cells, because they have half the genetic material information in them. And then, lucky women, you are also responsible for gestation of the developing new organism. So you have extra organs to house that developing organism during its gestation period as well. We'll talk about those. Questions? So that's kind of what I want you to know about the systems for this chapter. Then when we get into the specific system, we're going to get into more details as to what the actual anatomic and physiological function is of each of those systems. So we know what homeostasis is, but how is it controlled? How do we measure it? How do we monitor it? How do we make sure we keep it? Well, one of our systems, a couple of our systems are going to help us do that. One of the major ones, the nervous system. It's kind of like the hall monitor. You want to make sure nobody's running in the halls. If you run by the monitor, it's going to do what? See you, and then it's going to do what? Depending on how nasty it is. It's going to yell at you to slow down, or it's going to give you a demerit or whatever it was in those days that they gave you, or try to rectify that situation. Get it back to what it should be, homeostasis. So homeostatic controls work a couple of different ways. There's two different major ways to control these fixed levels that we need to have in our body. The first one is called the negative feedback system. And all negative feedback systems have the same basic parts. They give us a seesaw there to show us what's balanced. And that's when the seesaw is even at both ends, balanced. That's homeostasis. That's what we always want to strive for. But what happens when something gets unbalanced? Too much of something, too little of something. That's going to be like you running in the hall. Well, not yet. We've got to go through the whole thing before the feedback part comes in. But that's what we call the stimulus. Something has changed. Let's use a human example. Who has not eaten lunch yet? Did you eat breakfast? Perfect example. Yep. All right. Her homeostatic controls are really angry with her right now because they are working very hard to help maintain things like blood glucose levels in her body. So we'll use glucose because that's kind of something that everybody can relate to. That's one of our energy molecules that we need to make energy so that we can undergo reactions of metabolism and be complex organisms. And we have to have a certain amount of that being constantly transported through our system so that all of our cells can make enough energy to function on a day-to-day basis, especially our nervous system, because that's all it likes to use to make its energy. So if something goes awry with the level of glucose, and it's about 90 milligrams per deciliter, you don't have to write that down, but it's a number to think about. When it starts to dip down, the nervous system is going to fire off some bells. That dip down, that change, is what we call the stimulus, the change in the norm. The receptors, number 2, that are going to detect that, in this case, will be receptors in the nervous system. So that information from the receptors is sent to the control center. What do you think your control center is? Yeah, in your central nervous system. It's kind of like the CPU on your computer. That's your control center. So we send that information to the control center in this type of negative feedback loop, and we tell it something's wrong. The glucose levels are too low. If we don't get them up, the brain's going to shut down. So we have to create some sort of output, number 4, through an effector that's going to help try to get this blood glucose level back up. If that doesn't happen, what's going to happen to no breakfast and no lunch? Your brain's going to say, sorry, not enough energy. And you're going to do what? Shut down. Or pass out first. Not going to happen in one day's worth of meals. But your brain's really mad at you right now. So we need to do something, and we need to do something fast. We need to cause an effect to help bring those glucose levels back up. In the case of, and you don't have to write this down because we're going to talk about it when we talk about hormones and all that good stuff, but in this case, in order to bring my blood glucose levels back up, I have some hormones that I produce in the pancreas that will allow me to break down stored glucose. Hormone is called glucagon. And you have stored glucose in many places in your body, mainly in your liver, in the form of a large carbohydrate molecule called glycogen. And you have a bunch in your muscles too. But the only way I can really break it down is to call on this hormone. So the effect in this case, or the effector, nervous system, will stimulate the secretion of glucagon from the pancreas, which will then be transported through the circulatory system, break down some of those molecules, and release glucose into where? The bloodstream. What's going to happen to blood glucose levels? They're going to rise up and come back to normal, and that's going to help me get back to normal. But what should no breakfast and no lunch do? Go get some Twinkies. Yeah, because that's not good for your body. Yes? Well, don't get Twinkies because they're not good for your body either. Go get something good because your body needs that, needs it for energy. So that response will help bring back to normal that level. Once you go get something to eat and keep that homeostasis on, what's going to happen to the whole loop? It's going to stop. We don't need to break down any more glycogen. As a matter of fact, if I go get myself a decent meal, I'm going to use the stuff I need, and then what am I going to do with the rest? Yeah, then I'm going to replenish those stores. So I'll put them back as glycogen in the liver and the muscles and everywhere else. Okay? So the response does what? Does everybody understand that? Reduces the effect of the stimulus. Brings everybody back to homeostasis. This is the most common feedback mechanism in human organisms. So when we talk about hormones and how they control things, we're going to talk about negative feedback mechanisms. Body temperature regulation, negative feedback mechanisms. So all of these parts are labeled and very general in all of these feedback mechanisms. And if you flip through this book, you'll see tons and tons of these diagrams when we talk about homeostasis in the different systems. It's kind of like the heat in your house, too. Yes? How's that work? Yeah, you set on the thermostat a temperature. That's your homeostasis for your house. When that detector, that sensory receptor, let's call it, detects that the temperature is going down, it's going to signal what? It's going to signal your boiler, or however you produce heat in your house. That's going to then turn on and produce heat. Until what? Until it gets to that set point again. And then what's going to happen? It's going to shut off. It doesn't know how much heat to make. It just turns on and does its job. It's the receptor, that thermostat, that tells it to turn on and turn off to help maintain homeostasis. So your nervous system is very important. So make sure you give it enough glucose so it can do its job. The other feedback mechanism that they describe here is a positive feedback mechanism, which is kind of the same thing, except when I stimulate a response in a positive feedback mechanism, that doesn't necessarily shut it off like your thermostat does in your house. In order for me to shut off this reaction in a positive feedback mechanism, I have to remove the stimulus. They give us an example here of blood clotting. So I have to kind of stop the bleeding before this reaction stops. I'm going to give you a more understandable example. Childbirth. Yes? So what happens with the whole childbirth thing? Why? So baby's in that uterus, and yes, the baby grows in the uterus, not in your stomach. You will learn that in A&P. In the uterus, it gets larger and larger and larger until it reaches a certain point, a certain stretch. That's different for every single person. But once we've reached that point, that would be the stimulus, that max stretch. Now it's time to get rid of that stimulus. So that stretch will signal a response. In humans, it's going to signal your hypothalamus to release, actually it's your posterior pituitary gland that stores it, a hormone called what? It's called oxytocin. Once that gets into the bloodstream, it's going to stimulate the cells that make up your uterus to do what? Contract. And you are going to, one contraction at a time, squeeze that child out. So when I produce the oxytocin, we're done, right? No. When are we done? When the child is gone. When the stimulus has been what? Removed. And hopefully, if they have any consideration for their mother, they'll make it quick. Yes? Most of them don't. Do we understand the difference between a positive and a negative feedback? So me producing that hormone doesn't bring everything back to normal. The only thing that's going to bring everything back to normal in positive is removal of the stimulus. So know the difference between a positive and a negative feedback system. So we're constantly striving, and our systems are constantly working together to help maintain homeostatic balance. If something gets out of balance, my body's going to work very hard to get it back in balance. The next part of the chapter is the naked man. Yeah, this is the you memorize it part of this chapter. And there's really not too much for me to say about that except you memorize it. Because remember, your book is written this way. So when I say the front of your face, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say the anterior cephalic region. Yes? So if you don't know what that means, and you read that in your book, you're going to be like, what the heck does that mean? So you have to learn these terms. There's no other way around it. On page 12 in the textbook, table 1.1, you have orientation and directional terms. Superior, inferior, ventral, dorsal, medial, lateral, intermediate, proximal, distal, superficial, and deep. So you should understand what those terms mean and be able to define those terms. As far as regional terms go, this is where the naked man, anterior and posterior views come in. And see at the bottom of the diagram, it tells you what you're looking at. Now you kind of know that because there's the whole person. But if I throw a heart up there, and it says on the bottom, anterior view, do you now know what that means? The front. Now, in order to make sure that when we're talking about whatever it is we're talking about, we have to make sure that we're always in a certain position when we talk about it. And what's that position called? It's called anatomical position. And what is it? No. Facing forward. Now here's the trick. Palms forward. Why? Watch this. There's two bones here. When we get to the skeleton, we'll talk about those guys, the radius and the ulna. Watch. They just crossed over each other. So now when I'm looking at that, I'm not looking at the same thing anymore. Yes? So palms forward. Feet forward. So that's anatomical position. And then everything is described based on that anatomical position. So, know what anatomical position is. Know how to label the naked man, both anterior and posterior.
How long do we have to, like, I know we have to memorize all that. How long before we're expected to know all of that, everything on that picture?
It depends on what degree you describe expected to know.
Like,
To be able to label it, your first lab exam.
thank you.
I'm not going to have you do that in lecture. Lecture, I'm going to give you some sort of multiple choice question that will incorporate these terms. If I look at the front of your face, it is going to be, and then the choices might be anterior, lateral, posterior, ventral. I don't know. That wouldn't be good because those two could be the same. Yes? So it'll be something like that. But as far as recognizing it on a diagram and labeling it, it will be your first lab exam. I highly suggest you start yesterday, because there's a lot.
But it takes a lot longer than I thought.
Yes.
Posted on Tuesday
No.
and
You should be familiar with the terms, but as far as visually labeling, first lab exam. And the good thing is if you start now, then you can memorize these things in little chunks. So if you have like 70 things to memorize, if you start 14 days before, you do the math. How many things no, let's use another number. If I have 200 things to memorize, because I'm not good at math, 200 things to memorize, and you have 10 days to memorize them, 20 a day. But if you wait till the night before, you have 200 things to memorize. And what's going to happen to your brain? It's going to explode. You probably won't memorize all of them. Yes? So this course, if you take it in little bits, you'll be much happier. And those of you who have been through similar courses, shake your heads and tell them, yes, yes, yes. So really start now. The diagrams unlabeled that are going to be on your lab exam are up on CM Connect already. I put them in my lecture site. So no matter who your lab instructor is, I just leave them on my lecture site. And they're actually there for the whole year. So start today. Body planes. When we look at different organs or different organ systems, it's nice if we can take a peek inside. So sometimes we have to cut through them. Again, we have to know where we're cutting and what we're looking at. So if I cut this little cute car that some poor little kid probably left, it's in anatomical position. If I cut it this way, what is the plane that I'm cutting through in this particular piece of equipment? Yep, that's the frontal plane. Now if I cut this way, is it going to look the same when I cut inside and look inside? No. So again, it's important to know your anatomical turns and your body planes so I can know what I'm looking at. So know those body planes. Frontal plane, median or mid-sagittal plane, transverse plane. And in lab, there's a cute little exercise where we kind of look at different things if we cut them different ways. In your lab book, there's a banana all cut up. But you see it, you're going to see something totally different depending on what that cut is. So it's important for you to know those terms as well. And then in your book, we talk about body cavities. So again, when I'm talking about something, I should be able to kind of narrow it down to where it lives. And what's a cavity? It's kind of a space or a container. Because remember, we're closed all up with our integumentary system. So it's little containers where I place all of my different organs and organ systems throughout the body. And body cavities are very protective places for these organs and organ systems. They're lined so that whatever organ that's in those cavities is protected. If it moves up against the wall of those cavities, those membranes are going to help provide protection to decrease friction. Two major body cavities in this little diagram are outlined for us in your lateral, which is what? Side view, and anterior view, front. The first one's called the dorsal body cavity. And this is where the major hard drive stuff is for you as an organism. What's that? The brain and the spinal cord. So the spinal cord's kind of like wires in your house, transmitting information into and out of the brain. The brain and spinal cord are in their own little spaces in the dorsal body cavity. And why do you think we call it dorsal? What's dorsal mean? Yeah, dorsal means back, right? If I'm walking on four legs and I'm a dog. But we use it for this to describe this body cavity too. So in the dorsal body cavity, which is a main body cavity, there's two divisions. The cranium or cranial cavity, which houses who? Your brain. And then we have something that runs all the way down the back called the, well, what's it called cavity-wise? Vertebral. Why do we call it vertebral cavity? Do you know? There's bones that protect that spinal cord, and their names are the vertebrae. So we have a group of bones, and when we discuss the skeleton, we'll talk about the cervical, the thoracic, and the lumbar vertebrae, which are the bones that protect the spinal cord. Now, membranes cover all of the organ systems in this cavity as well. We'll talk about those guys in a minute. The other main body cavity, remember I said there was two, is everything else, with all the other organ systems in the front. And you've got to watch out for me because I use my hands to talk and sometimes I shut my microphone off. I didn't do it this time. What's that one called? The ventral body cavity. So it's the red one in your diagram. There's a whole lot of stuff in there. So it's not going to be as simple as the dorsal body cavity to break down. There's a whole bunch of different compartments here and a whole bunch of stuff that has to be identified. So we have a top part of this ventral body cavity, and a bottom part. The top part above a really big muscle that separates it in the middle, called the diaphragm. Above that is the thoracic cavity. Below that is everything else, and that's called the abdominal pelvic cavity. Now, each of those is broken down even further. So inside the thoracic cavity, what's in there anyway? Yeah, we got heart, lungs, we got a whole bunch of tubes running in and out of the respiratory and circulatory system. So those are also covered. The walls of these cavities are covered with membranes, as well as the organs themselves are covered with membranes. And we have compartments that hold 2 lungs, because you have 2 of them. And what's those called? What's that cavity? It's called the pleural cavity. How about the one hanging out in the middle? What's that in the middle called? Well, that has 2 divisions, that one in the middle. It's actually called the mediastinum. And the mediastinum, the one in the middle, has 2 divisions. The top part, guess what we call that? Superior mediastinum. And this is where I'm going to find things like the trachea and the esophagus. Those are tubes that run down through there. And then the bottom part is called that's the pericardial cavity. What's pericardial mean? Around the heart. So that's the bottom part of the mediastinum. We good with that? Below the diaphragm, we have the abdominal pelvic cavity. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there. So we're going to break that up. I'm going to skip ahead so that we can kind of narrow down what we're talking about. We've got a stomach, and we've got a large intestine, and a small intestine, and a bladder, and reproductive organs, and a liver, and a gallbladder. So we have to kind of narrow it down. So we can break it up into quadrants: right upper, right lower, left lower. Now, when you look at that, something's not right, is it? When you look at the diagram, face on. Is that your left? The left's on the right, the right's on the left. Yeah, exactly. So you have to kind of like turn yourself around and lay in there when you look at it. Well, that's kind of confusing, so we even break it up further. We break it up into 9 separate regions, and are you going to have to know these regions? Yes. Know them by name. They're called the 9 abdominal pelvic regions. Now, I want you to know the regions, and you don't necessarily have to memorize which organs are in those regions, but that diagram beside it sort of gives you an appreciation for why we need to narrow it down with the 9 regions rather than just the 4. Okay? So when you look at medical records, when you look at writings, when you look at descriptions by physicians, you'll see these terms, because any clinician that looks at it, or any clinical person that looks at it, knows the language of anatomy. And when I say the left epigastric region, they'll know what it means. Or inguinal region, yes? Or pubic region, or umbilical region. They'll know exactly what I'm talking about, right? So you need to know those two. I'm going back, because before I end my discussion of all of these wonderful things, we can't forget about membranes. These membranes are very important. Think about the heart, and this is what we have here. Membranes are going to surround the cavities or kind of stick to the walls of the cavities that we find different organ systems in. And they're also sort of adhered to the organ themselves. What is the heart doing in that little space? And it's a little space, kind of squished in there. Yeah, that. It's moving constantly. And it's rubbing what? Against the side of that cavity. So we have membranes associated with all of our organ systems that are going to help protect those organs from friction that can be created in those cavities. The serous membranes are typically named for the organ. So if we're talking about the heart, guess what we call the serous membranes that surround the heart? Around the heart. Who said it? Pericardial. Now remember, I said we had 2 layers of membranes. If you look at that little balloon example up there, that's sort of what we're going to see when we talk about serous membranes and cavity protection. So if I punch my fist into a balloon without breaking it, the fist would be covered with part of that balloon, and the pericardial cavity is the same way. So what do we call that serous membrane that covers the organ or is on the organ? It's called the visceral, and in the case of the heart, what do we call it? Pericardium. And then we also have part of those membranes that cover the pericardial cavity. What do we call that? They're called parietal, and because they're around the heart, pericardium. What's between the 2 membranes? Fluid. Serous fluid. If it's in the pericardial cavity, what do we call the serous fluid? Yeah, almost. We take out the serous because that's a given. So it's pericardial fluid. We have abdominal pelvic fluid. We have pleural fluid. It's all serous fluid. And what's it for? Yeah, decrease friction. Just like that's why, and if anybody didn't know, you're going to learn it in anatomy. It's why you need to put oil in your car. Yes? It's very, very important. And people will get angry with you if you don't have oil in your car, especially your car. Why? Yeah, metal against metal. Oh, there happens to be a little car here. So pistons go up and down in what? That engine block, right? And that's what gives us enough energy to do what? Go that way. Now what's in that little setup so that the metal against metal doesn't do what? Do this right now. Take your 2 hands, put them together, and rub as hard as you can. What are you creating? Heat, and lots of it. Well, your car and the pistons in the engine block going a lot faster than you just rubbed your hands, yes? Creating a lot more heat. Eventually what's going to happen? They're going to fuse together, yes? And you're not going anywhere. So the oil or the fluids are going to help prevent that heat from building up, because now, watch, I can't rub my hands together because the oil's between me, right? So that's what it's for. And it's going to protect organ systems and body cavities from a heat meltdown. So if there's too much fluid or not enough fluid, that can be a problem, right? In your car, if there's too much fluid, it just spills out all over the place and makes a mess. But in you, it might create too much what in the system? Pressure. If I have too much pressure in the system, remember, we talked about that. That pressure thing's important. I might not be able to have exchange happen at the proper rate. A neat little blurb on medical imaging is at the end of your textbook. And one of the things I want to point out about your textbook is the tables and the diagrams. Who thinks you're a visual person in here? Yeah, I'm very visual. I like pictures. But I like people to explain things to me, but it helps if I have a picture. The tables, like this one, are going to help you study, because they are going to take 3 or 4 paragraphs of information, written information, and make it what? 3 or 4 lines. That's another key to being successful in this class. Make a lot of information what? Small, so that I can remember it. So use the tables like this to your advantage. They're going to help you learn something without so many words. And when you go to study, you don't want to be reading this book the night before your exam, do you? No. I don't know. I will tell you in a second, though. Page 12. So this is the beginning of it. This is the middle, and that's the end. So everybody understand what they need to know from chapter 1? Any questions on what you need to know for chapter 1? What's going to happen on Tuesday? Quiz. Your first quiz. What's your quiz on? You don't have to label anything. So quizzes and tests in lecture will be in written form. You don't have to label any diagrams in lecture. Where are you going to label those diagrams? Lab. Everybody gets the same lab test, no matter who your instructor is. So that's how we keep continuity through the course. Your lecture quizzes Tuesday will be at the very beginning of class. Do not, under any circumstances, be late. If you are late, I get grumpy. Yes? And you disrupt everyone. Yes, sir?
Is it just on the stuff we just talked about?
It's on the entire chapter.
Just one.
Chapter 1. Not 2, just 1. Tuesday, we will continue discussing chapter 2, which we will start today. But let's pull out those clickers and let's see how this thing works. Remember I told you to take it out and put the battery in it before we start? Oh, the battery's already in? Okay, just rip the package open. Now, it's still going to work, but you're just going to come up as a number. We're playing right now, okay? You must register your clicker. And I know some of you just got them today and you haven't had time to do that. But register your clicker. Where are the directions? In the box. And, thank you, on Sam Connect. She's throwing it around. I want to point out a couple things about the clicker. They're really fun and you'll like them, I think. But they're very sensitive. And if you shove them in your purse, and if your purse looks anything like mine, there's a lot of crap in there. And some of your crap might hit the on button. And then it'll be on. And then you come to class and you go to use your clicker and you're like, because your battery's dead. Yes? So, little hint. If you have a place to put it, make sure you can't hit the button. Here's another little trick. What you might do is put it in a plastic bag, take the battery out. That way, when it's time to use it, you will come to class, stick the battery in, and you'll know the gosh darn thing's going to work. Or I had like an old glass case. Yeah, just to stick it in there so that nothing would make it go on. But those are some little tricks. Those are some little problems that we run into. I just put the batteries in, but yeah, it's been on for 4 days, so the batteries are gone. Okay? If you forget your clicker, too bad. See all the bodies? Okay. Bring your clicker. It's bring your clicker, bring yourself. Bring it every class. Okay? If you break or drop or whatever, get another one. Okay? You can't share clickers either if you're in the same class. Okay? So, you got to have a clicker. It's part of the course. And you'll see how it works in a minute. So I'm going to pose a question to you from, and these are all written from the book, blank is the study of the body's structure. And then I'm going to press the start button. And then you're going to choose A, B, C, or D.
How do you know when it works, though? Green flash.
You get a green light, and see that number in the corner? It's going to go up. Now here's the trick with the clickers. Say you press it, and I still am doing my thing, and you say, oh shoot, no, it's not A, it's B. You can change your mind. Just press B. It'll change its mind. But the last thing you push before I hit the stop button, which is also in that corner, is the last answer that will register in my computer system. So you can change your mind, but that last one that you pick, that's the one that's going to register.
Just don't accidentally hit another button while you think you're all set.
Yeah. Don't accidentally hit another button. I think. And one of my students, I thought he was so cute. Halfway through the class, I said, well, you know, your first clicker, I can't say that all together, clicker quiz grade is going to be posted. And he said, what? Grade? I thought this was just for fun. Not just for fun. It's part of your grade. So he was picking like all the wrong answers. You know, the whole class would pick A and there would be one B. And I was like, what are you know? I was like, what's that? And he'd laugh and giggle. And yeah, he got a really bad clicker quiz grade the first time. So it's part of your grade. Pick the right answer. And it's not a community choice. So you three in the back, the buds back there, make your own clicker question choice. Because one bud might be wrong and then get you all the wrong answer. Okay? So did everybody push a button? There's only 58 people in this class today. At least 58 people with a clicker. How did I know that? Because I am so smart. But see, it registers number. So everybody done? Okay, so then I press stop, and then I press display. So ooh, smart people. And the nice thing about the clickers is we don't know who that one is. So you can go, dummy, and you could have been the one. But that's okay. It's anonymous. Not to me, but to everybody else, which is good. So, what do you think the answer is to this question? It's B. So we're going to go in and we're going to choose B. And that's how the clickers work. So, we good? We're going with the audience choice. So yeah, it's kind of like the whole Who Wants to Be a Millionaire thing, right? All right, let's do another one. Is the study of the body's function. So I have to start. See, I'm a little slow on the draw because my mouse disappeared. So I have to hit go. Ooh! And I'll know when to stop now because when it hits that magic number, then I'll know everybody did what they were supposed to do. So there's 2 slackers. Hurry up and push a button. Ooh! Don't you hate when that happens? It's that darn heavy book. All right. So. Wait a minute. I can do that too. Sorry. All right. Now we hit stop. See why we're doing this for fun? And then I hit my display. And again. E isn't even a choice. But that's okay. We're learning. So what do you think the answer is? The answer is D. So when I do this, now I create myself a spreadsheet. And you, when you register your thank you, that thing, your name is going to come up with your responses. And it's going to tell me how many you got right and how many you got wrong. And I'm going to take so many sessions, probably the first 3. I'm going to take the total number of questions I asked, the total number you got right. I'm going to divide that by the total I asked, and that's going to give me a percentage. And that's going to be one of your quiz grades. You see how that works? Okay. Not this. Don't worry about this. Because whoever picked D, slap yourself. All right, which of the following is a logical organization when we talk about the organization of the human body? We should get like Jeopardy music. Ding, ding, ding. And then I'm going to get, then I always do this. Okay, hurry up and pick one. 5, 4, 3, 2. And then we hit display. Oh, interesting. Now, this tells me someone, more than just one, but how many people didn't get it? Yeah. So this is the feedback I'm talking about. Now, I want to warn you, when you take a multiple choice question test, you have to do 2 things, and you have to be methodical about it. 1, read the question. Don't laugh. Read the whole question. You know what happens to us when we take a multiple choice test? We start reading the question like, I know the answer now. Pick the answer, go to the next one. No. Take your time. Be methodical. Read the whole question, and then do what? Read all of the answers, not just the one, the first one, yeah, go, go, go. Everybody's always in a rush. Read all the answers. Okay? So, what's the answer to this question? Let me get my mouse back. The answer is D. So you should go with the audience on this one. So what are the answers? From smallest to largest in the organization scheme. Atoms come together to make molecules. Molecules make up cells. Cells make up tissues. Okay? All right. Of the 8 necessary life functions, which of the following is not required for an individual's survival? Oh, 58. Hello, I'm sleeping. 59, somebody else?
Does it register more than once?
No. Maybe somebody wasn't answering. No, once you hit that button, your name comes up. Remember I said you could hit it again? No, nobody, this isn't a registered account, it's just like a general thing. You can use this system if you gave a conference, for example, and you wanted to get feedback, you want to ask questions, you can just pass these out and do this. And they're not associated with anybody's name. That's what we're doing right now. Once you hit your clicker, though, if you change your mind and hit another answer, the number's not going to change up on my display because you're already registered as answering. So for maybe some of you were answering and you really weren't registering. Okay? Or your clicker was off. Yep. That'll do it. So, what is not necessary for an individual to survive? Reproduction. Okay, you better maintain your boundaries or your guts will be spilling out all over the sidewalk. You're not going to last very long. If you can't undergo reactions of metabolism, you're a goner. And if you can't get rid of the trash, yeah, you're a goner too. You see why? Does that make more sense to the choosers of the other answers? But you as an organism don't have to reproduce to survive as an organism. Make sense? To survive as a species, if that was the question, then reproduction wouldn't be a choice, right? See, these instant feedback things are nice. All right, 2 more questions, and then we can go on. If someone has broken a leg, he or she has damaged the what division of the body? I'm going to find my mouse. Why does my mouse disappear? Just giving you a hint. Isn't it a good one? Big money. Oh, yeah, that's annoying, isn't it? All those commercials are annoying. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So if you didn't answer, tough. What does that tell me? What are you doing this weekend? This tells me, what are you doing this weekend? You're going to start studying those anatomical terms. So what's the answer to my question? B, the appendicular, your what? Appendages. That was your hint. Skeleton. And the term blank refers to internal organs, while the term blank refers to body cavity. And I'll throw the word lining in there just to help you a little bit. Five, 4, 3, 2. All right, what's the answer? We have to study this weekend. Yes?
What's hard about that is, like, the internal organs, that could be more than one.
No. It says the term blank refers to the internal organs, while the term... Now look at all your choices. No, because serosa refers to what? No, serosa refers to the membranes. It doesn't refer to the internal organs. It refers to the membranes. So number 1, cross it off your list. Now number 2, yeah, that could be possible because visceral, it refers to what? The internal organs. But does the second part of that choice work? No, because ventral is what? That refers to a body cavity. All of those guys. So that one, off the list. C, serosa, again, refers to membranes, not an organ. So cross that off the list. Who's left? That's right. So what's the answer to this question? D. Visceral membranes on the organs and parietal membranes on the, or lining the, body cavity. See? So if I'm methodical about my answers and I go through them and see if they fit, if it's a 2-part answer and one of the parts doesn't fit, guess what? That's not it. Or the other thing, and I'm not dating myself here, but I must admit I enjoyed watching it. Sesame Street. One of these things is not like the other. You remember that? So that's another thing to remember when you take a multiple choice question test. Because sometimes there's like 2 or 3 things that are almost like the same thing, and one of them's totally different. Guess what? It's probably that one. Or two things are the same. It's a multiple choice question. There can only be what? One answer, unless I ask you in I'm nasty and say both B and C, and that's cruel and inhuman, and I rarely do that. So there's only one answer. If two things are the same, what do you think? No, it's not either of them because they're the same. So I can take them off my list. Now I have a 50-50 chance of getting it right instead of a 25% chance of getting it right. See? I just made better odds for myself. And if you're a gambling person, 50-50 is better than 25%, right? Don't ever leave a multiple choice answer blank, ever. Guess. Okay? But that's a good way to help you narrow down the answer. And I'm going to be nice to you and let you